All right, so what we're digging into today, it's not really just a story. Think of it more like a case file, a really chilling warning pulled from the annals of weird fiction, all about a guy who decided to kick down the door to reality and, well, he found the abyss staring right back at him.
That line right there, that was the man's panicked shriek. And that's really where our investigation has to start, with this cry of just pure terror that seems to echo through time. So the big question is, what in the world did he see?
Okay, so let's meet our subject, a guy named Halpin Chalmers. Now, Chalmers was an occultist, a mystic. Basically, he was a man who looked at modern science and thought, this is way too slow. He wanted a shortcut, right? A much more dangerous, but also more direct path to figuring out how the universe really works.
And his core belief was, pretty out there. He thought time and motion were just illusions. For him, all of history, the past, the present, the future, it was all happening simultaneously, just somewhere else. He was absolutely convinced that if he could just find the right key, he could pop outside of our timeline and see it all unfold. So what was this key he was looking for? Well, it was this: an exotic, almost mythical drug called Liao. And let's be clear, this was not for a good time. For Chalmers, this was a precision instrument, something he believed could disconnect his consciousness from his body and just let it drift on the currents of time. And man, was he about to drift far. And this is where everything goes horribly, horribly wrong. See, Chalmers didn't just end up in a different when. He somehow stumbled into a different how. He found out that reality has this hidden geometry, and he had just trespassed into a place where the math was all wrong.
This really gets to the heart of the horror he uncovered. So Chalmers' theory was that all life, everything we know, everything he called pure, exists in the curves of space-time. But what he found was something else. A totally separate, foul reality that only exists in the angles. A place of sharp, alien geometry. And these two places, they were never, ever supposed to meet.
And these are his words, his actual attempt to describe what he saw in that angular place. He wasn't talking about creatures of flesh and blood. No, it was something way worse. Things without bodies. Almost like pure concepts of hunger, just moving through a reality that's completely hostile to ours. Simply put, he traveled way too far back. He pushed his mind beyond the very dawn of life on this planet, into a primordial soup where only the angles existed. And there, in that ancient alien geometry, he saw something. And it scented him. In that one single moment, the whole game changed. He wasn't some detached observer anymore. His very presence, his curved soul, was like a foreign smell in their angular world. The hunter of knowledge had just become the hunted.
Okay, so he's tripped an alarm, and now these things, these predators from beyond time, are aware of him. We need to figure out what exactly he was up against. Let's take a look at the anatomy of this impossible predator. This is the big question, right? What are the Hounds of Tindalos? What are these things that don't hunt through space, but through the very angles of reality itself?
Well, the occult lore gives us a surprisingly specific and absolutely terrifying profile. For starters, they can only get into our world through sharp angles. We're talking 120 degrees or less. They first show up as smoke, which then forms a head and then a body, an appearance that's apparently just too foul to describe. They have this hollow tongue or proboscis they use to drain all your body fluids. They leave behind this weird blue ichor. And maybe the worst part of all, they are super persistent. Once they're on your trail, they never give up the hunt. Even their name is a puzzle. Tindalos sounds super ancient and Greek, right? But it might actually come from a Melanesian word for ghost or spirit, which would imply they're literally spirit hounds, not just monsters, but specters of a foul geometry hunting souls through time. And that brings us to the final tragic act of this whole mess. Chalmers knew the rules of the hunt now. He knew the hounds needed angles to get to him. So he came up with a plan, a desperate, kind of brilliant, but ultimately doomed plan for survival.
I mean, his logic was solid. You have to give him that. If they need angles, he'd build a place with no angles. So here's what he did. He emptied a room of everything, hired plasters to come in and cover every single corner, every edge, every joint. He had them create a sealed, perfectly curved, oval-shaped room.
a fortress of curves.
But he didn't plan for fate. A small earthquake shook the building. It wasn't a big one, but it was just enough to shatter the plaster inside his perfectly sealed room, creating dozens of tiny, brand-new, razor-sharp angles. Can you believe it? He built the perfect defense, and the universe itself just ripped it up in for them.
The result was grim. They found Chalmers' body the next morning. He was decapitated and completely exsanguinated, drained of every last drop of fluid, and all around him was that strange blue pus. The hunt was over.
But the story doesn't actually end there. The horror of what happened to Halpin Chalmers kind of escaped the pages of that old pulp magazine. It started to haunt our culture. This idea, which was dreamed up by a writer named Frank Belknap Long, really took on a life of its own.
And you can literally trace the spread, like an infection. It first shows up in 1929. Almost immediately, it gets picked up by Long's good friend, a guy you might have heard of, H.P. Lovecraft. He saw how terrifying the concept was, and he wove it into his own stories, which, massively boosted its signal. From there, it just kept spreading, all the way to 2008, where it inspired a song by Metallica, one of the biggest bands on the planet.
And, just look at how far their influence has spread. We're talking literature, music, comics, and, of course, tabletop RPGs. The concept is absolutely perfect for games like Call of Cthulhu or Pathfinder. You're moving your character across a grid, right? A map made of literal geometric spaces. The terror of an enemy that can burst out of any corner becomes a very real, very tactical threat.
So that brings us to the big why. Almost 100 years later, why does this particular story, why do these creatures still get under our skin so much?
I think it's because they turn something totally mundane into something absolutely monstrous. It makes you paranoid about physics itself. The threat isn't just some monster that lives in the woods. It's the idea that a whole other hostile reality can leak through the cracks of our own. It literally weaponizes geometry, and it turns this safest corner of your room into a potential doorway for a predator that will never, ever stop.
Which, of course, leaves us with one final lingering thought. Go on, look around the room you're in right now. Take a second. How many corners can you see?